What's up, man? How y'all doing? My name is Ronnie, AKA Reconcile, the rapper, activist. Dude that's gonna have some jokes for y'all today and some stories. How y'all doing, man? Hey, so I've been traveling, I've been moving. I was just in Chicago doing Sunday, doing a Stop the Violence concert with the mayor of Chicago and Big Crit, and then flying back down to Miami, working with some leaders in the state for juvenile justice reform. And then I jumped on the plane. I think I got to the airport like 3:45 this morning to jump out here and holler at y'all. So some things are moving, shaking, but I'm happy to be here. And more than anything, just seeing what you guys are building. That's what it's about, man. The stuff that y'all are doing, just this room. Just this room is the stuff that gets me up in the morning. People from all different walks of life, caring about people under the banner of Christ. And that's what it's about. That's really what it's about. I left my clicker. I might need somebody to come bring me the clicker. It's over on that chair over there. But today, I just want to tell you a little bit about who I am. I want to talk a little bit about juvenile justice reform. I want to talk about people, as far as just like marginalized people, how we can work together to try to reach them. Thank you so much. And I just want to kind of commission y'all at the end. So is that okay? All right, cool. So We the Revolt is an organization that we founded, like y'all were talking about, just some friends, attorneys, pastors, rappers, guys who had co-labored together and say, you know what? Like, nobody else is coming to fix these issues except the Holy Spirit through us. That's it. We could sit here and wait. Nobody else is coming except the Holy Spirit through us. So let's go. Let's figure it out. And all of you guys are part of organizations. You know, at times it takes funding, but more than anything, it just takes initiative, Christ, effort, partnerships. There's nothing that we can't do. If you can think it and you can get some people together and you got some grit, you can get it done. Am I lying? Like everything that you put your hands to today, everything that I put my hands to is just at some point somebody has some initiative, right? So I never would have thought I'd been a person up here on this stage talking to y'all, based off where I come from. I grew up, my mom was a teenage mother. She had 2 kids by the time she was 16. I was her second child. My mom, she had a lot of different struggles. My mom was African American. My dad, he's white Caucasian in South Florida. All of my family is from South Florida. If y'all go to South Florida, y'all gonna see a lot of transplants, New Jersey, New York. All of my generations are all from South Florida, from both sides. So if I got a thick South Florida accent, we don't say Florida. South Florida. Just bear with me, work with me, all right? My mom, teenage mother, we grew up, my mom, when she had me, she was getting ready to have an abortion because my grandma told her, look, how you gonna have 2 kids at 16? You doing your own thing. If you don't have this abortion, you gotta get out of my house because obviously you doing you, and that ain't finna happen in here. So my mom, she decided to stick through with it. I went to go live with my dad's family. They all lived in a trailer. This is the oldest trailer. He grew up in that trailer. I grew up in that trailer. The trailer was old. The door didn't even lock good. There was holes in the floor. We used to take a rubber band and put it around a little hook to lock the door. The wind used to bust that thing wide open. And it was a challenging, upbringing. My mom, she always felt like she didn't have a life. My mom went to a program called LAMP, which is for pregnant mothers. She didn't go to prom. She didn't finish high school like that. She just kind of pushed through. And she would come to us and she would say things like, when you were born, that's when my life ended. Like my dreams, my hopes, my goals, that ended when you were born because everything had to change. Everything just became hard. Everything just became so much an issue. And at some point, by the time I started getting older, my mom used to always say stuff like, one day I'm just not gonna be here. And I was just like, oh, Mom, you just had a bad day. You'd be all right. But one day I came home and she didn't come home no more. And that did something to me. That turned me up. That made me angry. And my dad, this dude, I love him today. But back then I ain't love this man, I promise you. Me and him, we was like water and oil. We was not like this. And my dad, he was a broken man. He was a depressed man. He had no idea what to do with all the emotions that he had, and now he got all these kids left on him. So he became very violent. He was already kind of violent. He became extremely violent. Me and him started getting into fist fights. My dad kicked me out the house. I started living with my grandma. My grandma rope was long because I used to tell my grandma straight up, I said, Grandma, what you gonna do, whoop me? You gonna whoop me? Grandma, ain't nobody worried about that whooping. I don't know if some of y'all ever told you, you would never tell your grandma that. I was like, girl, I'd take my grandma van, be gone all weekend. You know what I'm saying? I'm doing hood rat things with my hood rat friends, grandma. I was out. And you know what's crazy? What's crazy is in the midst of that challenging, violent home, me and my dad used to fist fight, and dad kicked me out of the house, like maybe 9th, 10th grade. I was living with my grandma through the rest of high school. I got into a lot of different trouble. Everybody around me, all my cousins, everybody was involved in doing the wrong thing. Matter of fact, we didn't even have aspirations of people doing the right thing. The only kind of positive aspiration was college football. You gonna play college football somewhere? You gonna play football somewhere big time? And I was good at football, but I wasn't good at the rest of things in life. No discipline, none of that stuff. And while I was a kid on probation with the little, what's it called? They had to come to your house with the curfew with the probation officer. It was an advocate, and that's a special word because I'm gonna share it more. It was an advocate who came into my life, shared Christ with me. Not only did he share Christ with me, did life with me, brought me around his family, his world, and it was a Hispanic pastor from, y'all probably don't know nothing about Florida, but it's a little town in Florida called Immokalee, where it's migrant workers, Haitian migrant workers, and utter poverty. And that's where he came from. And he took the time to share Christ with me, and it was transformative in my life. I remember telling him, I was like, bro, you just talk to my dad, though. And he was like, yeah, I'll talk to my dad. I said, I don't want to talk to nobody from the church, right? One more thing I wanted to share with you about just the story, and then I'm gonna transition. My dad, I didn't understand him. Me and him had a lot of falling out. I don't know about y'all, anybody here got a rough relationship with a parent, violent relationship with a parent, toxic relationship. But there's one thing that my dad said that stuck with me, and it's important for the type of exposure that kids need in juvenile justice, that this kind of correlates. My dad, violent, came to me one day, years later, he said, man, you know, the reason I was so tough and so physical with you, abusive, was because I didn't want you to be like your cousins. I didn't want you to be like my brother. I didn't want you to be incarcerated, and you just was going the wrong way, and I felt like there was nothing I could do to reach you. There was nothing I could say. You were just hell-bent on going the wrong way. So I tried to use my fist. And I ended up coming to Christ, changing my life around, changing everything about myself, and getting a college football scholarship. But right before I went off to school, and there's something I hung in my locker, my dad brought me to the table at his house. He had bills laid out all over the table. This bill for this many hundred, this bill for that, this bill for that, $1,000, credit card maxed out, credit card this, that. Like he had no money, he was at his wit's end, he was stressed, he was tired, losing hair. And he said, I want you to look at this. And it was like a bank receipt. And the bank receipt was like negative, like $600, late draft fees and overdraft fees. And he said, this is why I want you to do something else with your life. I want you to be something. He's like, but I don't know how to show you to be something else. All I ever inherited was what you see. I hope you could see something else one day. That's why I just hope that the football thing worked out. I ended up going to play college football at Rice University. I triple majored. And while I was at Rice University, I used to fly on jets, first class. I mean, you walk up to the airport, to the airplane on the Clearport, it was fly. Hop in the plane, you know, police motorcade escorts to every single game. But God was building up something in my spirit. He's like, I didn't bring you this far for you. I brought you this far so you could go back. And that started me on a journey of caring about the people that came up like me, right? I think all of us have this story. I think you might not understand your story while you're going through it, but then I think now today you're like, man, God gave me a little nugget there, he gave me a little piece there. All that was super painful has a lot of purpose here for this person. Am I lying? It's crazy how he weaves that. Couple points of reflection. See if my slide's working with me. And every hardship is a seed of greater purpose. Don't curse the storm, let it water your growth. Next slide right here. I'm just get a little nuggets. Y'all want to take you in, just a little nuggets, all right? Next one, as I get ready to talk about juvenile justice, I'm gonna save that one, I'm gonna come to it. What I learned from my story is that resilience, a lot of times you say, oh, that person's resilient. Resilience isn't just about overcoming a hardship. Resilience is about using that hardship to fuel and fight for something better. Next thing, as I grew in my understanding, as I started working with kids in justice, as I grew in my understanding what justice is. Justice is this. It's not about retribution, it's about redemption. It's about seeing the humanity in every person, no matter how lost they might seem. So let me do this. Justice without compassion is cold, it's hollow. Real justice heals and it restores. You think about, I always give kids in the programs and the jails and different stuff that work, and I always give them juxtaposition. I say, we do life like this. God has a standard like this. God isn't just like the judge that you talk to in the courtroom. We always got our kids like, yeah, I was with Judge Prescott. God's not Judge Prescott. Judge Prescott's a good dude, but God cares about actually restoring your entire life. He wants to heal you. He wants to heal you. So, real quick, I want to tell you about juvenile justice and justice. I want to kind of dive you into a world that you probably don't know about. I met somebody in this room that does a little bit of juvenile justice, goes into the detention centers and has that as their thing. Love that. I got into this work really back in Houston working with the gang units when I was in college, playing college ball. And I realized, I'm like, man, these kids need a lot of help. I started working for Department of Children and Families in Houston. And I would go into houses and be like, man, these kids just don't need the court to tell them to do something. They need a whole, they need a wraparound, a whole thing that addresses a whole bunch of issues. Otherwise, this is a Band-Aid on a friggin' fire hydrant. And I realized that kids need just a lot of extensive help. And so real quick, I want to talk about juvenile justice. So in other countries, they don't really have juvenile justice. I remember I was talking, we have our circuit advisory board meeting in Miami-Dade County Circuit 11, and the head of that board, Ms. Osborne, she was saying I just went to Europe and they don't even lock kids up. They have a whole different thing. It's an American thing to incarcerate youth. Did you know that? It's a very American thing to incarcerate youth. And it all stems from a history of how we dealt with slaves after slaves were freed. It also deals from a history of how youth offenders were typecasted in news, headlines and nightly news updates where you start getting words like super predator and this and that. And what happened is, instead of rehabilitating youth, what we did is we punished them for their crime. So instead of actually helping somebody maybe get past something that is very harmful in their life, we just made it a little bit more harder for them. Every research document out there that has anything to do with juvenile justice says once you introduce a youth into the world of incarceration or the system, that every time they are worse off because of it. The only time they're not worse off because of it is when they come into contact with somebody that loves Christ, that pours into them, becomes their advocate. I keep using that word. So, real quick, I want to tell you just a couple stories so you can just kind of understand some of the kids I work with. I wrote a song about this one. Y'all can check it out. It's called 14 and the Beans. The Beans is the housing projects in Liberty City, Miami. It's called the Pork and Beans. Housing projects are actually in the process of being tore down and renovated. But there was a kid I met in the jail, 14, 120 pounds, soaking wet. Had to be the toughest little kid in there. Most of the kids are like 17, 18. Kids come with a whole bunch of different charges. They can have murder charge. Sometimes sitting there, a kid, just seen them on the news, murder. And then there's stuff like, kids selling drugs and doing other different stuff. But this kid, he came up to me, said, I'd like for you to pray with me. I pray with all the kids after we're done. We get very nitty gritty to the specific details. I said, yeah. So when he got his turn, I pulled him aside. He said, but before you pray, I got a question. He's like, how come God don't answer none of my prayers? I said, what do you mean? He's like, well, I was praying to God when I was free. I was like, what kind of things were you praying for? He's like, keep the lights on, help my grandma pay the bills. He's like, I live with my grandma. I said, what makes you think that God doesn't answer prayers? He's like, well, the lights got cut off. Grandma, when they pay the bills, she's on, she had these health issues. And I was like, well, you have any other family? Well, my mom, she died, and my father's incarcerated. I said, okay, you have like brothers and sisters? Yeah, I got a brother, but he just died. I was like, man, I don't even, now I feel where this is coming from. And so as I'm talking to the young man, I said, well, what happened to your brother? He said, well, the bills got real low, lights got cut off. My brother, he's dabbling in the drugs and crime. He said he went to go, word we use down there is called hit a lick, but that means to come up on some money. So he robbed a drug house. He said he hit a lick on the trap house, didn't work out, he got murdered. He said the money came in, he said grandma paid the bills or whatever, and he got murdered. I said, I'm so sorry to hear that. What's going on with you? What's your story? He's like, well, after that happened, bills got tight again. My grandma, she's really tough. She's kind of like tired of like all the issues that come with me and my brothers and all this different stuff. So I just wanted to help out. He said, so I decided I was gonna go rob the same trap house. I said, whoa. I was like, that's like running the same play. I'm from the 1 yard line trying to get a touchdown, 99 yards. I was like, that play didn't work the first time. Why are you trying to run that play again? But this was his story. He said, I went to rob the trap house, didn't even get through the back door. They saw it was me. They saw my face. I went back to my grandma's house. Hours later, they shot through my grandma's house. I told my grandma to get on the floor. She was on the floor after they finished shooting bullets through the house. She got up off the floor and she told me, I want you out of my house. Never come back to my house again. And so he said, I started doing other stuff and I got caught up with this crime and this is how I'm in here. And what I want to present to you is, for some of us in our city, like some of these realities is just crazy. And I wish I could just say like, this is just one side story. But because I do this stuff every single day, it's not a side story. Man, these kids got all kind of different stories. And don't even get me started on the girls that be incarcerated. They stories be wild. Family trying to prostitute them. A lot of the deal stems from family issues that are never resolved. So it's not just like, hey, go to this program, work on your anger. It's like, bro, I gotta go back to the same house. I'm going back to the same economic factors. I'm going back to the, I'm marinating in what is called like the ignorance and death around me, and nobody's showing me anything. So it's very deep. Just as I start thinking about, some of these kids, I've had kids get out, get murdered the next day. I've had kids get out. I had one kid, he got out, he robbed a pregnant lady at the red light, shot and killed her and her baby. And I was just like, whoa, how did that happen? I had another kid get out. He's like, Ronnie, Mr. Ronnie, I'm gonna tell you right now, I accepted Jesus Christ, but when I get home, they ain't gonna be on that Jesus stuff. I'm telling you. I'm like, no, you just gotta trust Christ and you gotta move, change the circumstances. A week later, he got shot, right? He's on crutches. And he's like, Ronnie, Mr. Ronnie, I just quit. I got to go back to making money. I got to go back to doing this. And it's just over and over and over. Like me and my colleagues, like we hold up every time the news comes on. We just like kind of hold, because it's like, is it finna be one? We had literally one of our programs. We had 7 kids from the program that we were working with weekly die in that year, and it's just like, yo. Now, so I asked for funding, fundraise. I try to get people involved in this mission so we can provide these kids with the type of things that they need. And I was talking to this funder. He's like, man, Ron, I really respect you, man. I love what you do. You're a good guy. You know, I would love to give. I might give, you know. But he's like, I'm gonna be honest with you, you know. My buddies, you know, I know you want me to ask my buddies if they can contribute as well. My buddies, like, they would rather kind of give to the children's hospital. I was like, what do you mean? Break that down for me. He's like, don't you kind of feel like anything or any effort that you're doing is just kind of like taking a bottle of water and trying to pour it on a forest fire? He's like, how do you know that any of this is actually going to help or make a difference? I said, somebody was an advocate for me, and I'm standing before you today. There was a murder. One of the kids from our program was involved in a murder in the Pork and Beans housing projects. This is all crazy. There was a 6-year-old girl got shot in the head by her uncle. Then the next 3 days after that, there was 5 kids that got shot in a drive-by. 3 of them, their bodies were slumped over the stoop right there in the projects. And it's crazy because the day before I asked them, I was like, yeah, stop hanging out here, come into the program, we got food, got all this different stuff. They slumped out, they're gone. And so, you know, of course, all the local leaders and the politicians, they come out. Everybody's trying to show face. Oh, this is horrible. This is a tragedy. Let me show my face. It's election time. Oh my gosh, this is so sad. You know, and I had a chance, one of the politicians pulled him aside. I said, you know, we do programs right here in the community center. You know, what do you think, you know, what can we start to do to actually make this change? And he looked at me. I'm not gonna say his name. He said, Ronnie, that's your name, Ronnie, right? Man, it's over for them. If they're above the age 6, it's already too late. It's too late. You gotta wait for the whole next generation, my man. It's a wash. We have to tear all this down and start over. And his mindset was just like, it's too, and I can try to understand where he's coming from, but the effort's not there. Because without the effort, nothing changes. His mindset is, it's too thorough. It's the mama, it's the auntie, it's the economic situation. It's too thorough to actually change any of it. It's multi-layered, multifaceted. It's too thorough. However, I want to share this with you. The way that we look at these kids has created a cycle that these young people are not given the tools to rebuild their lives, but instead are pushed further into the margins, further away from the opportunities that actually could change their futures. We can't talk about just failures of the justice system, because there's a lot of failures inside the justice system, without also talking about the culture that surrounds it, because kids aren't just growing up in a vacuum. They're growing up in environments where the odds are stacked against them from the very start. They're bombarded with images of violence and crime, images that too often glorify the very behavior that leads them to this destructive behavior in the first place. I share with you those stories. You know, somebody might ask, I hear this question a lot of times, and I'm gonna read this. This is kind of what people say. Ronnie, why would they want to glorify street life and selling drugs and gangs and violence? I said, I'm glad you asked. Imagine you, your family, and everybody you know doesn't own anything. Everybody in your entire sphere is broke, living with unsolved, unresolved, serious trauma, doing whatever to get by. Your entire life has been trying to stay above water. and poverty. Things that seem common, essential to others are things that you've never seen anyone personally attain. Imagine going to schools where fighting is more consistent than the teacher actually having everybody's attention. Where the youth football fields are filled with drug dealers betting on games and coaching. Where you can't name someone that is living righteously consistently. Where your parent doesn't have the means to expose you to different opportunities. When you don't know anyone who's married. And your communities are over-policed and structured in a manner that you can never succeed or get ahead unless you're LeBron James or a famous rapper. You start to tell yourself, I might not have nothing, but I have my pain. I have my struggle. I have street respect, which is a code of honor to those deeply entrenched in this lifestyle. And it's not that you decide to become somebody else. You literally don't see life any other way. So much so that your actions and the actions that you make, they make a lot of sense to you. They don't make a lot of sense to us, but to you, it's logical. I did this because of that. I carry a gun because of this. I robbed them because of that. Money was looking this way, so this is what you do. How do you tackle that? Because until we start addressing that, we will always continue to have these issues, right? We'll always continue. And addressing that is not one person, one organization. It's a team sport. It's all of us. It's all of us. But if we don't care, or if we don't think about it, who will come along? Nobody. We the Revolt, our mission is we want to get dirty. We want to get dirty. We want to get involved. We want to partner like you're doing today. You get together with other people. What are you doing? What are you doing? Okay, you got a little bit of this. I got a little bit of that. We're going, that's what it's all about. We're just going to figure it out. We're going to go. We're going to strategize. We're going to be smart. We're going to link smart people. We're going to figure it out. But we're not going to quit. We're not going to give up. We're going to find needs, find issues, and do our best. Right? Somebody might say, well, man, I give. I volunteer, I help park cars at the church. Isn't that enough? If that's enough, man, our city is, woo! Sorry, Phoenix. If that's enough. I want to challenge us Christian leaders. I heard this story, I'm going to pass the story along. It's about a pastor in Mississippi, right before the civil rights era, like maybe 1950s. There was this pastor. And oh man, he loved Christ. At his church, you're going to hear the gospel. You're going to hear Jesus Christ is the only way, the truth, the life. He is the only way to get to Christ. You're going to hear all these different beautiful things about what it means to love God, to serve God, all these different things. But what was happening right outside his church doors was they were lynching people. And it came wind to him. He found out that some of his members were a part of the mob that was pleased with what was happening and even took part in the lynchings. So the pastor, loving Christ, loving what comes, the fruit that comes from Christ, and knowing that this can't represent anything that looks like Christ. This defames Christ. This is a stumbling block for the beauty and everything that Frederick Douglass had a thing. He says, I love the impartiality of Christ. Frederick Douglass was a mixed slave. His father was a plantation owner. His mother was a slave. He became free, and he still loved Christ, even everything he had gone through. He had this quote. He says, if I love the impartiality of Christ, I must hate the Christianity of this land, because they don't go coincide. They don't go hand in hand. They don't go together. So this pastor, he's at this conundrum. He's at this fork in the road. He's at this space. He goes, what do I say? What do I do? If I say something, if I do something, if I challenge them, I either lose them as a member or they come after me. they'll end my career in this town. I won't preach anywhere. I'll be an outcast. I might as well be just like the people that they lynched. So he said nothing. And the gospel never penetrated outside of his church doors. Let me ask you this. It's easy to do church. It's easy to do programs. And I had this one pastor come to me. He was so excited about what their church was doing. And I'm not trying to shoot what his church is doing down in any way. He's like, oh man, bro, there's this tribe in this country on the other side of India, and they don't have Bibles in their language. And so we're paying this company, and they're coming up with translating the Bible in their language, and it's this great thing, and they're gonna get Bibles, and they're gonna learn about Christ and all. And yes, we're doing that, and they had given like $200K to this effort of doing Bibles for an indigenous tribe in the other side of India. But he couldn't tell you one thing about what the people in his community need. He had no relationships in the black part of town. He had no relationships in the Hispanic part of town. He had no relationships in the trailer parks. He didn't know what those people needed at all. None of his church went to those areas. There's not one outreach, not a dollar or a dime spent addressing those people. Because I believe maybe that crowd's a little bit difficult. That crowd, you got to pull your sleeves up a little bit, get dirty. That crowd might actually want to come to the church and not tithe. And it ain't just an affluent pastor from an affluent community. Same thing with black pastor in a poor black community. I used to live in Third Ward, Houston, Texas. Literally a church on every corner. Literally, church right here, you walk across the street, another church, walk down to the block, another church. Well, we need 3 churches right here, for real. And I would go in, because part of my, when I was graduating, I had this project, and I would go talk to these pastors and interview them. And I said, so tell me about your church. The demographics, where they come from. Well, most of the church don't even come from Third Ward, Houston, Texas. Like, what do you mean? They live in humble, if you know anything about Houston, it's like he was talking about all the suburbs that these black people commuted into his church. And I said, well, what is your outreach to the community? Well, I started unveiling this us versus them. I'm trying to focus on the members in the congregation that was here and that give and that tithe, and they're good people. And just last week, they stole the copper out the AC. They was down the street drugging, and it was like, wow, you don't have a heart for the people that live right here. Because it's a little bit more dirty. You don't want them sitting in your pews and they smell like homeless people. You don't want them actually, like the stuff that's difficult that you would have to actually deal with them. So I want to give us some challenges. Anybody read the book of John? Okay, we in a good crowd. All right, book of John. I like y'all good people. Book of John, you get Jesus. In the beginning, the word was, and it. All right, cool. All right, throughout the book of John, I'm not going to get too super deep, but there's a theme that you can uncover. Every time they come at Jesus, and they come at Jesus a lot, they try to trip him up, right? But there's a theme of how Jesus kind of handles people that aren't from the church, people that wouldn't look like they would even step into church, and people that are representing God in some type of way. I'm going to read this. If you were to go back and read the book of John, every word and every interaction of Jesus with people, you would see a trend. Jesus doesn't spend much of his time or concern, not to say that he isn't concerned about it, on telling sinners how sinful they are. As if he knew this simple truth. People lost in their sin are going to continue to be people who do stuff that represents people that are lost in their sin. However, the trend that you can see is how he reprimanded over and over again those who claim to know God, claim to represent God, and those who made barriers for the people who were far from God even to get to God. Think about it. Woman at the well, we can't worship over there, why not? You sure you would, just all these consistent themes. He tells this parable about the Good Samaritan. He's like, well, who's this dude's neighbor? Oh, surely I wouldn't touch him. He's unclean. Oh, so the Samaritan's his neighbor? Think about it. In which ways were the religious leaders of their day a stumbling block to Christ? Jesus says over and over to them, I am the Christ, but you do not recognize me. He says, you do not hear my words. You claim to know God, but are missing me, and you're not even tending to the sheep. And he says it over. Like, so much so, like when you read through, he's like, man, Jesus said this a lot. Over and over and over and over again. So I want to ask you this. When was the last time that you preached a sermon? When was the last time that you looked at your initiatives and said, you know what, let's get a little uncomfortable? When was the last time you challenged those around you under your spiritual influence to get messy and do complicated work that felt Christ-centered no matter how difficult it was? Like, we're just going to do the Christ thing. I don't care how difficult it is. That's what we're going to do. I have just some biblical things I just want to share with you, and I'm going to end on this, and we're going to do a Q&A. Everything that we're talking about is deeply rooted in Scripture. It's not just about making us, like this. I'm not here to make anybody feel good today. I'm hoping that we live in truth and we get excited about it. I'm here to get y'all lit. The Bible says in Micah 6:8, act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. It's not a suggestion. It's a call to action. It says, Isaiah 1:17, we're told to seek justice, defend the oppressed. Now, I know much of us might be saying like, okay, look, where do I start? And I think you look around this room and you start just by starting. You go, you get on your knees before you God. What is the thing? Young, old, like we all are called to be part of the change that we want to see. Matthew 5:9, blessed are the peacemakers, not the peacekeepers, but the peacemakers, those who actively work to bring about reconciliation and healing. Real quick, last little story. There's this mother in my program. If any of y'all ever had a volunteer, this is the greatest volunteer I've ever had in my life. Her son was facing life sentence. Can you imagine a 17-year-old looking at a life sentence? And she told her son, she said, look, I'm never going to come visit you if you continue to do these things, because he had been in and out of jail, in and out of jail, in and out of jail, in and out of jail. And he ends up getting this big sentence. And so she's like wrecked to her core. I invited her to one of our banquets where we're like doing different stuff and sharing stories. And she goes, you know what, can you mind if I come into the jail with you? Maybe I can talk to the other mothers that are visiting their sons. Maybe I could talk to the kids in there, like tell them the same thing that I wish that my son would have heard. So she starts coming. And when I tell you this lady gets on fire, like sometimes I just step back, I'm like, hey, do your thing. Hey, y'all listen to mama, you know what I'm saying? And she gets in her bag. And you would have never thought that this petite Hispanic woman would be this firehouse. And it's not because she went to school for it. She don't have no seminary degree. She just cares deeply. She cares deeply. And it's part of her unlikely story of how could all this pain turn into something is part of her testimony, and it's also part of what makes God able to use her. Her posture. She's been broken and she's using brokenness to bring healing. And I think all of us have the ability to do that in this room. My name is Ronnie Lillard. We the Revolt. I appreciate you guys. And we're going to do a quick Q&A. Thank you.